Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Today we're taking a deep dive into an event from over a century ago, March 25th, 1911.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, a name that still carries a lot of weight.
It really does. An event that tragically claimed 146 lives in, what, just 18 minutes?
Unbelievably fast, 18 minutes. Yet it also sparked this huge shift in worker safety, a real revolution.
And that's really our mission with this deep dive, isn't it?
Exactly. We're not just here to recount the events, the timeline.
Right.
We want to extract the most important nuggets, the insights from the sources, help you understand the context, sure, the immediate impact, which was devastating.
Of course.
But crucially, its surprising long-term legacy, how it still resonates today.
And, well, you'll discover it's a shocking tale. Corporate negligence, human desperation, and the powerful, though sometimes incredibly slow, wheels of justice and reform.
Sometimes needing a massive tragedy to even start turning.
So let's set the scene then. We're in Manhattan, early 20th century.
Right. The Triangle Shirtwaist Company. Big name in garment manufacturing.
And they occupied the top floors, right? 8th, 9th, and 10th of the Ash Building.
That's the place. A huge operation for the time, around 500 workers.
Mostly young immigrant women, I understand.
Overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
Many were teenagers, very young women, often the main breadwinners for their families.
And the conditions inside, what do the sources say?
Oh, it paints a pretty grim picture. Cramped spaces, poorly ventilated, unsanitary, definitely hazardous.
Just packed in there, making shirtwaists, those blouses.
Exactly. Popular item back then. But they were working grueling hours. We're talking 12-hour days, 7 days a week sometimes.
Wow.
These were, the typical sweatshop conditions of the era.
It just sounds like, well, a disaster waiting to happen given those conditions.
Well, yes. And while difficult conditions weren't unique, the Triangle factory had this specific litany of safety failures.
So it was worse than average, even for the time.
In terms of specific risks, absolutely. Think about this. 4 elevators in the building, only 1 was working.
Just 1. For 500 people.
And it could only carry about 12 people at a time, max.
That's inadequate. Doesn't even cover it.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Then you had 2 staircases, one of them locked.
Locked? Why?
Supposedly to prevent theft. Keep workers from leaving with materials, So that left only 1 route down.
And was that one route okay?
It was incredibly narrow.
Yeah.
Barely usable in an emergency. Plus, things we take for granted now. Sprinkler systems, proper fire escapes that go all the way down.
No mandates for those back then.
No, not like today. No real requirement for them.
And here's where it gets, well, really interesting, or maybe infuriating. The owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, they knew about fire risks, right?
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't their first fire. Their factory had actually caught fire twice before.
Twice.
Yeah, once in 1902, again in 1907. Minor fires, thankfully, but still.
Yet they didn't make any substantial safety improvements after those.
Apparently not. The sources suggest the attitude was very much, as long as profits are rolling in, why bother with the expense of safety?
It really was a recipe for disaster. Just seems inevitable looking back.
And that inevitable disaster struck.
Huh.
Around 4:40 p.m., Saturday, March 25th, 1911.
Okay.
A fire started, likely from a cigarette or a match, in a scrap bin on the 8th floor.
And with all that fabric around.
Exactly. Mountains of flammable cuttings, scraps. The flames just took off, spread with terrifying speed, engulfed the floors very, very quickly.
And the chaos, I imagine, was immediate, amplified by all that negligence we talked about.
Absolutely. That fire hose they had installed on the floor, useless.
What?
Apparently the hose itself was rotted through and the valve was rusted shut. Couldn't even turn it on.
Unbelievable. And the elevator, the one working one?
It made a few trips, desperately overloaded with people trying to escape.
Yeah.
But the heat, the smoke, it quickly broke down. Couldn't handle it.
So that escape route was gone.
Gone. And remember, one staircase locked, the other one narrow and likely jammed with people panicking. Doors locked. Workers were trapped.
Just horrifying to picture what was happening outside.
Well, the fire department arrived quickly, actually. Very fast response. But they're ladders. They only reached the 7th floor. Maybe the 6th. Some accounts say 7th. Point is, nowhere near high enough.
So the 8th, 9th, 10th floors, completely out of reach.
Completely. Hundreds of workers trapped above the flames, visible from the street.
And that's when people started jumping.
Yes, desperate to escape the fire. Many jumped from the windows. It was a horrific spectacle for the crowds below.
Did the safety nets work? I read something about nets.
They tried. Firefighters and even bystanders held life nets, but they just weren't strong enough. People were jumping from too high, sometimes in groups. The nets ripped or broke under the impact.
Oh my God. So jumping often wasn't survival?
Tragically, no. Many died instantly on the pavement. Others were caught in the nets, but still died from the fall or the fire. And many, many more were burned alive inside.
The final numbers are just devastating.
They are. Contained in 18 minutes, that fire. But 146 lives lost.
Can you break that down? The sources mention different causes.
Yeah, the records show roughly 49 burned alive or died from smoke inhalation inside. Another 36 died in the elevator shaft, trying to escape that way or falling.
And the jumpers?
58 jumped or fell to their deaths, and a few others died later from injuries.
And some were so young.
Heartbreakingly.
Yeah.
Girls, really.
Yeah.
As young as 14 years old among the dead.
The public reaction must have been overwhelming, seeing people jump.
It was immediate and immense. That visual, people literally leaping from windows, it just gripped the city, the nation. Massive public outrage followed.
Demands for change.
Huge demands for reform. Workplace safety laws, especially for women and children, suddenly became a top priority. And the owners, Blank and Harris.
They were charged.
Yes, quickly charged with manslaughter, gross negligence.
But then the trial. This is where the story takes another gut-wrenching turn.
It does. The trial happened later that year, December 1911. And despite what seemed like, overwhelming evidence of their negligence,
they were acquitted.
Both acquitted. The jury found they couldn't prove intent to cause harm. Under the law at the time, negligence, even fatal negligence, wasn't enough for a manslaughter conviction if intent wasn't there.
That's hard to stomach, the lack of accountability.
Absolutely. And it gets worse when you look at the financial side.
The compensation.
Yeah. So the families of the victims eventually won a civil suit, but they received just $75 per death.
$75. That's about, what, $2,300 today?
Roughly, yeah. A pittance. Meanwhile, Blank and Harris, the owners?
They had insurance.
Oh, yes. They collected about $400 per death from their insurance policy, totaling around $60,000 back then.
Which is nearly $1.8 million today.
Exactly. They actually profited financially from the fire, while the victims' families got almost nothing. That disparity just fueled the public anger even more.
But despite that injustice, the acquittal, the money, the tragedy did lead to change.
Yes, and this is what's so fascinating. Despite the failure of the criminal trial, the sheer horror and the public outcry became this incredibly powerful catalyst.
More powerful than previous incidents.
Much more. It connected the dots for people. It wasn't just a fire, it was this fire. With these victims, young immigrant women, and this visible horror, it fundamentally reshaped the conversation around labor law and industrial safety in America.
It created political will then.
Absolutely. Politicians, even those in, say, New York's Tammany Hall machine, who weren't typically pro-labor, couldn't ignore it anymore. The public demand was too strong.
And this led to actual laws.
Right away, practically. In New York, the Sullivan-Hoey Fire Prevention Law passed later that same year, 1911.
What did that do?
It mandated things like sprinkler systems in high-risk buildings, better fire escapes, unlocked doors during work hours, fire drills, real, tangible safety improvement.
And enforcement. Laws are one thing.
Good point. The fire also spurred the creation of the New York City Fire Prevention Bureau, a dedicated agency with the power to inspect factories and actually enforce these new, much stricter safety regulations.
So a broader impact beyond just fire safety?
Definitely. It brought momentum to the push for better working conditions overall, particularly for women and children. It underlined the absolute necessity of labor protections, that workers' lives couldn't just be expendable costs of doing business.
And what about the unions, the activists? They must have played a role.
A huge role. Organizations like the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, the ILGWU, they've been fighting for years for safer conditions.
So largely ignored before the fire.
To a large extent, yes. Their strikes and demands hadn't forced widespread change. But the fire, it gave them leverage they never had before.
How did they use that?
Sources suggest they were incredibly effective at channeling that public outrage into sustained political pressure. Lobbying efforts, working with reform-minded politicians. They translated emotion into concrete action. The fire essentially forced people to listen to what the ILGWU have been saying all along.
So looking back at the whole thing, it really raises that question. Could this have been prevented?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any serious debate about that among historians or activists.
Given everything, the locked doors, the flammable materials everywhere, the useless hose, the inadequate escapes, the owners knowing the risks.
Exactly. It wasn't just preventable, it was predictable. Almost inevitable under those specific circumstances created by negligence.
And beyond the immediate failures, it really exposed bigger issues, didn't it?
It really did. It shone a harsh light on the exploitation workers faced, especially vulnerable groups like immigrants and women in America's booming industries.
That power imbalance.
A massive power imbalance between owners and workers. And it really forced a reckoning, or the start of one, about the ethical responsibilities of businesses. That basic safety isn't an optional extra.
So the legacy is complex, horrific tragedy, but also a turning point.
Definitely. The Triangle Fire stands as this stark reminder of what happens with unregulated industrialization and, frankly, corporate greed.
But also a catalyst for progressive reform.
Hugely influential. It fueled the labor movement, helped shape modern labor rights in the U.S., stronger unions, better conditions, vital protections, particularly for women and children, trace roots back to this.
And it's still remembered today?
Commemorated every year. Its lessons continue to resonate, sadly, in fights for workers' rights, not just in the U.S., but globally.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire is such a heartbreaking story, but it's also, I guess, a powerful testament to what can happen when people get outraged and demand change. Persistent activism can work.
It can.
It reminds us that, behind almost every safety rule we take for granted today, there's often a tragedy, a terrible lesson that had to be learned.
And this deep dive into the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, it really prompts us to think, doesn't it? Not just about how far we've come in workplace safety, which is significant,
right,
but also what current practices, maybe things less obvious than locked doors today, might be setting the stage for future preventable tragedies.
Okay.
What stands out to you as you listen as a modern-day parallel? Perhaps that unchecked pursuit of profit or efficiency over basic human well-being.